The freeloading ends today. My husband said that right after he got promoted. His voice was decisive, like he was announcing a new policy in a boardroom, not speaking to the wife he'd lived with for 6 years. We would separate our bank accounts. Financial independence. Clear lines. Fairness. I nodded. No objections. No follow-up questions. And 3 weeks later, he regretted it. Welcome to my channel, where I share new everyday life stories here every day. And I truly appreciate it if you'd hit subscribe and like this video. Now, let's continue the story. Thursday night. The kitchen was filled with the smell of rosemary. I stood at the stove, stirring the risotto in slow, steady circles. When Marcus walked in, I didn't turn around right away. I knew that look. The look of someone who's practiced saying something unpleasant in the mirror, convinced himself it was reasonable, even strong. His leather shoes clicked against the hardwood floor, each step evenly spaced, like a countdown. I kept stirring. "Elena, we need to talk," Marcus said. I turned off the stove and faced him. He was still in his work clothes, the dark gray suit he'd bought to celebrate the new position, priced high enough to cover a month of groceries for our family. His hair was slicked neatly into place, rigid, the hairstyle of a man preparing for a battle he was certain he'd win. Maybe he really was preparing to fight. "Yeah," I said. Just one word. Because I'd learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let someone else fill the silence with their own lack. Marcus set his leather briefcase on the table. The expensive one his mother bought him, not the one I'd suggested because it was more practical. "I got promoted," he said, even though I'd known for 3 hours already. He'd texted me a string of celebration emojis that looked more like a victory dance than an invitation to share his happiness. "Congratulations," I said. And I meant it. I was never the kind of person who resented a partner's success. What I hated was what changed after they succeeded. "It comes with a significant raise," he continued. And then I heard it. The shift in his voice. The meeting room voice. The voice of someone reading from a proposal. "So, our financial situation is going to have to change." I leaned back against the counter, folded my arms, and waited. "I've been thinking," Marcus said, and I could hear his mother's voice forming in his mouth. I could hear Victoria, as clearly as if she were standing behind him with a hand on his back, speaking through him. "The way we use a joint account, it's not appropriate anymore." "Which way?" I asked, even though I knew all too well. "The freeloading," he said. The word hung in the air, like smoke from a fire you haven't found the source of yet. Freeloading, as if everything I contributed was parasitic, as if my job as a teacher and the extra tutoring hours I took on to bring in more income while still running the entire household were somehow draining him dry. As if the meals I cooked, the home I maintained, the life I organized around his ambitions were nothing more than worthless clinging. "I understand," I said, "because when the person you love turns you into a leech, really, there isn't much else you can say." "I think we should separate our accounts from now on," Marcus declared. The way he said it made it clear this speech had been rehearsed. Maybe at the office, maybe while he was driving home. The two of them must have believed they were teaching me a lesson about financial independence. If you ask how I felt in that moment, not angry, not yet. What I felt was clarity, seeing my marriage more clearly than I ever had. "All right," I said. Marcus blinked. He'd been expecting resistance, an argument, maybe tears. What he got was agreement. "Really?" he asked. "Really," I said. "Separate accounts. You keep your income. I keep mine. We split living expenses 50-50. That's what you want, right? Yes, he replied too quickly. Relief washed over his face, like he'd just escaped a trap he didn't realize he'd walked himself into. Then do it, I said, turning back to the risotto, the pot that had stopped simmering because I'd neglected it. I added broth, added butter, stirred again. Tomorrow we go to the bank, I said. Transfer everything. Start fresh. Thank you, Marcus said. There was triumph in his voice, the belief that he'd just won something. But understanding and agreeing are not the same thing. I understood that Marcus believed my teaching job was less than his corporate climb, even though that income had quietly kept our life from collapsing in ways he'd never bothered to calculate. Your mother's coming for lunch this Sunday, I reminded him, stirring the risotto until it reached the perfect consistency. You'll make what she likes, right? Marcus asked, eyes still glued to his phone. What she likes? Osso buco, I confirmed. She'll love it, he said, kissing my cheek before heading into the bedroom to shed his corporate armor. I plated dinner. We ate in silence. A kind of silence that was slowly becoming the new normal. Marcus scrolled on his phone, answering work emails. I watched him, committing the moment to memory, knowing everything was about to shift. After dinner, I washed the dishes. Marcus disappeared into his office. I heard his voice on the phone with his mother, rising and falling, intimate, complicit. She agreed, Marcus said. Every syllable was a victory. Victoria's response echoed faintly through the speaker, but I could imagine it. Probably about how her son had finally taken control. Probably about how I must be relieved not to pretend I was contributing equally anymore. Words designed to make Marcus feel powerful and me feel small. That night, I sat at the folding table in the corner of the apartment, the one Marcus called your work corner. I opened my laptop and started writing everything down. Every source of income, every expense, every single dollar. I spent 2 consecutive nights digging through everything I'd kept for years. Old bank statements, credit card bills, lease paperwork, stacks of receipts stuffed into a shoebox under the bed. I was always the kind of person who kept documents. Marcus used to laugh at me for it. What do you keep all this junk for? He'd say. Yeah, Marcus. This is why. I wrote down every single household expense from the past 6 years. Rent, the portion I quietly covered every month so we could keep living this polished life. Over $48,000 in total. Utilities, electricity, water, internet. The bills I always paid because once Marcus forgot, and we had the power cut off on a winter night. Christmas gifts for his family. Birthday presents for his mother. Anniversary dinners. New curtains for the living room. The cost of repairing the washing machine. A new refrigerator when the old one suddenly died. And Marcus's golf club membership. Yes, I paid for that too. He'd asked me to handle it because he was too busy. That was 5 years ago. And then I just kept handling it. Quietly, without credit. Without ever bringing it up again. The numbers kept climbing, line after line, the total growing in a way that forced me to stop a few times, take a deep breath, and then keep going. When I finally added everything up, the number on the screen made my eyes burn. In just 6 years, my additional income, nearly $400,000. The rent I'd subsidized, more than $48,000. Thousands of hours of invisible labor. Cooking, managing, organizing, sustaining a life so Marcus could focus entirely on his career. I had been the invisible infrastructure of this life. I was the one who remembered his mother's birthday, bought the gifts, let Marcus stand there and receive the thanks. 6 years of contributions that Marcus, and his mother too, had convinced themselves were less valuable simply because they came from my teaching work, not a fixed corporate paycheck. My teacher's income was never small. It paid for trips, for the dining set he bragged about to his friends, And that man said I was freeloading off him. I didn't confront him with those numbers. Not yet. I saved them onto a USB drive and placed it in the deepest drawer of my desk. I was waiting, not for revenge, but for the truth to find its own moment. Sunday morning arrived. I woke up very early, like every time Victoria was coming for lunch, and started preparing the food. The beef shank needed hours of braising. The risotto had to be made close to serving time. The vegetables would be roasted with herbs picked from the small garden on the balcony. Marcus was still asleep. Lately, on weekends, he always slept in, blaming exhaustion from his new position. I worked alone in the kitchen, something I'd come to find more comfortable. There was something almost meditative in the steady rhythm of knife against cutting board, in the slow transformation of flavors. By noon, the apartment was filled with the scent of an old-style Italian kitchen. The dining table was set with the good dishes, the set Marcus had insisted on buying, meant for occasions like this, when his parents or relatives came over and we needed to play the role of the successful couple. Victoria arrived exactly at noon. Victoria was never late, and she treated tardiness as a moral failing. She walked in trailing a cloud of expensive perfume and familiar judgment. Her husband, Frank, followed behind, the posture of a man who had long since given up trying to intervene. "Marcus!" Victoria called, not looking at me, as if I were part of the furniture. "You look radiant. The new position suits you so well." Marcus smiled, accepting his mother's embrace. "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad," I said, nodding. "Yeah," Frank replied quietly, looking at me with the faintest trace of sympathy, the look of someone who already knew where this lunch was headed. "What smells so good?" Victoria said, finally acknowledging my existence by complimenting the food in a tone that sounded almost surprised I could cook anything properly. "Your favorite," I replied. "How thoughtful," she said, in the way that always meant the opposite. We sat down at the table. I brought out the dishes, slipping into the role already assigned to me in this family play. A supporting character, a backdrop, something meant to make Marcus's success shine brighter. Victoria dominated the conversation, as usual. She asked Marcus about the new position, how much his salary had increased, his future career path. Asked about the company car, the expense account, the office location. She cataloged her son's achievements like exhibits in a museum. Not once did she ask what I was doing, and Marcus didn't mention it either. I ate my portion in silence, watching the performance, a family pantomime. Frank caught my eye and lifted his wine glass slightly. A very small, very male gesture, between people who had learned that sometimes, to survive, you have to stay quiet. Then Victoria said it. "I'm so proud of you, Marcus," she declared, reaching for her son's hand. "At last you can focus on your success without someone sucking your blood." The word appeared again. Marcus was decent enough to look uncomfortable. He shot a quick glance at me, then looked away. But he didn't correct his mother, didn't defend me, just gave a thin smile and changed the subject. And that was when I knew. No doubt, no hesitation. I knew for certain that this marriage was already dead. It just hadn't been officially announced yet. I stood up. "Excuse me," I said, my voice calm, controlled. "I'll go check on the dessert." I walked into the kitchen, hands steady, mind clear. Behind me, I heard Victoria launching into another story about Marcus's genius child moments. Another anecdote meant to prove he was born for greatness. And me, what was I born for? Temporary, replaceable, a placeholder wife, until something more worthy came along. I took the dessert out of the fridge, the one I'd made the night before, because even at my most lucid, I couldn't do things carelessly. And I thought about the USB drive in the desk drawer. I thought about how tomorrow we'd go to the bank and open separate accounts. And I thought about my marriage, and whether staying was still appropriate. Monday morning felt like the first day of a war. I woke up before Marcus, which was nothing unusual. My body clock had adjusted years ago to suit his schedule, his needs, his rhythm of life, but this morning was different. He was still asleep when I slipped out of bed. His face was pressed into the pillow. His work clothes were still on, unchanged from exhaustion. He'd gone into the office all day Sunday, even though no one had asked him to. There was a time I saw that as responsibility, as him trying to build our future. Now, I only saw the exhaustion of maintaining an image of success slowly eating him from the inside out. I made coffee using a French press, the kind that requires time and attention. Because even now, even in the middle of this quiet revolution, I couldn't force myself to make bad coffee. It was one of the small dignities I held on to. A refusal to let circumstances degrade the quality of simple pleasures. The apartment filled with a rich, seductive aroma. I stood by the kitchen window, watching the city wake up below. Delivery trucks, early office workers. Marcus appeared 20 minutes later, already dressed in another power suit. This one was navy with subtle pinstripes, undoubtedly worth more than a week of my tutoring income. He looked sharp, intimidating, like someone who had rehearsed confidence until it hardened into armor. "Good morning," he said, pouring coffee into the travel mug I'd given him 2 birthdays ago. The mug engraved with his initials. He didn't thank me for making it. He hadn't for months. "Good morning," I replied, neutral. "After work today, we should stop by the bank. Open separate accounts." He paused mid-sip, and I saw something flicker across his face. Surprise, maybe. Or suspicion that I was being too agreeable. People who are cruel rarely believe you when you don't resist. They mistake your calm for weakness, your patience for stupidity. "Yay," he said. "The accounts. I'll meet you at the main branch at 5. 5 works, I said. He grabbed his bag, checked his phone, sprayed cologne in the mirror, a routine he'd perfected during rushed mornings. "Text me if you're late." "Yeah." He hesitated at the door, and for a moment, I thought he might say something, apologize for what his mother said yesterday, acknowledge the cruelty of calling me a freeloader in my own home, at the dining table where I'd served a meal that took hours to prepare. But the moment passed. He stepped out, his shoes clicking down the hallway. I stayed behind alone with my coffee and the morning light, and an absolute certainty about what I was about to do. That morning, I worked on rescheduling my classes, checking my students' progress, the work that brought in extra income. Good money, more than Marcus thought, because he'd stopped asking about my earnings once he started believing his mother that I was a financial burden. No office, no impressive business cards, no performance reviews or quarterly bonuses, just work and money appearing in my account afterward. And referrals brought new students, people who'd risen from nothing, now had money, and wanted to learn the things they couldn't afford as children. Wealthy young wives who wanted to be more appealing in their husbands' eyes. A few other clients, diverse, steady, who had given me a solid income stream. At 4:30, I drove to the bank. The main branch was the kind of modern building that tried to look welcoming, all glass and minimalist interiors, as if someone had been hired to make capitalism feel pleasant. I sat in the lobby, watching people come and go. Each of them carried their financial burdens in handbags, briefcases, and tense shoulders. Marcus arrived at 5:15. Late, but not late enough to be inconvenient. He looked tired, distracted, pulling out his phone to answer work emails the moment he sat down. "Sorry," he said, not looking at me. "The meeting ran long." "It's fine," I replied. And it was. A bank employee in her 50s, with kind eyes and a name tag that read Jennifer, called us over. Her voice was professional, warm enough to reassure, not warm enough to cross a line. "So," Jennifer said, hands folded in front of her, "you'd like to separate a joint account into individual accounts?" "Yes," Marcus said immediately, without waiting for me. "We want financial independence. 2 separate checking accounts, 2 separate savings accounts." Jennifer nodded, typing. "And how would you like to divide the current balance in the joint account?" Marcus turned to me. For the first time since we'd arrived, he actually looked at me. There was a familiar expectation in his eyes. He was waiting for me to take less, waiting for me to be grateful for whatever portion he deemed fair. 50, I said. His eyes widened. What? 50, 50-50, I repeated evenly. An equal split of the current balance. He paused, glanced at the banker, clearly uncomfortable arguing in front of a stranger. Can we discuss this privately? There's nothing to discuss, I said calmly. We're separating finances. Unless you contributed more than 50% to that account. An equal split is fair. I watched him calculate in his head, watched him try to remember how much I'd actually contributed over the years. The problem was, he couldn't remember because he'd stopped paying attention. He'd convinced himself his corporate salary was the sun around which our financial universe revolved. Ignoring the fact that my income paid for vacations, furniture, extravagant birthday gifts for his mother, the replacement of his car's transmission. Fine, he said finally, jaw tightening. 50-50. Jennifer maintained her professional neutrality, though I caught a flicker in her eyes. Recognition, perhaps, of a scenario she'd seen many times before. She printed the paperwork. We signed. She explained the process. The joint account would be closed. The funds split evenly. Each of us could set up individual income transfers. New cards would be mailed within 7 to 10 days. And household expenses? Jennifer asked. We'll split them, Marcus said quickly. 50-50. I almost laughed. Almost. Because he had no idea what 50-50 actually meant in a household. He was thinking rent and utilities. He wasn't thinking about groceries, toiletries, toilet paper, light bulbs, dozens of invisible costs that keep a home running. All right, I said, pulling out my phone. Then we should have a shared spreadsheet to track expenses. Marcus blinked. A spreadsheet? For transparency? Yeah, I said, already opening Google Sheets. Each of us logs what we spend on household items. We reconcile at the end of the month. I saw the moment it landed. The moment he realized separating finances meant really separating them. Not him being independent, while I continued to carry the load in silence, but actual equality. Okay, he said slowly. A spreadsheet. I created it right there at Jennifer's desk. Columns for date, type of expense, amount, who paid. I shared it with Marcus's email. This month is a fresh start, I said. We left the bank separately. He said he had to return to the office for another meeting. I thought he just needed space to process the vague feeling that something had shifted, even if he couldn't name it yet. I drove home alone, sat in the parking lot for a moment. Engine off, hands on the steering wheel. The sun set behind the buildings, staining everything amber and shadow. I thought about Victoria's face at Sunday lunch, the way she called me a freeloader so casually, so cruelly, like she was commenting on the weather. I thought about Marcus's silence. That silence wasn't neutral, it was complicity. And I thought about the days ahead. Dinner that night was very simple. Pasta with jarred tomato sauce. No garnish, no table setting, no ritual. Marcus got home close to 8, looking tired, and found me eating at the kitchen counter, a book open in front of me. You already ate? He asked, a little surprised. Yeah, I said. I was hungry. There's some left in the pot if you want. He looked at the pot of pasta on the stove that I hadn't served for him. Hadn't kept warm for him. Hadn't prepared and plated the way I usually did. This was the real meaning of separating finances. Not just separate accounts, but separate considerations, separate rhythms, priorities that no longer revolved around each other. Oh, he said. Okay. I watched him serve himself. Watched the way he moved through a kitchen he'd never really known how to operate, because I'd always been the one cooking. He put the plate in the microwave, even though it was still warm. He couldn't find the Parmesan cheese because he'd never paid attention to where anything was kept. That was the first crack. The moment he began to see the outline of something he'd taken for granted. But he still didn't fully understand. Not yet. How was your day? I asked. Busy, he said. A lot going on. The new position is demanding. Sounds tiring, I said, neutral. We ate in silence. He checked his phone between bites. I finished a chapter of my book. Two people sharing the same space, no longer trying to talk. After eating, he went into the office to keep working through emails. I cleaned the kitchen, washed my dishes, only the ones I'd dirtied. I left his plate in the sink. It might look petty, but it wasn't retaliation. It was clarity. Kindness given to someone who doesn't value it stops being kindness. It becomes self-harm. I spent the rest of the evening working on my laptop, watching videos my students had sent, sending them feedback. My income for this month alone was already close to Marcus's new salary, but now he wouldn't see it. Wouldn't see the money coming in. Wouldn't have to face the truth that the person he called a freeloader was the one who'd quietly kept this life running. Near midnight, the office door opened. Marcus came into the bedroom, changed into sleepwear, and lay down beside me. The mattress dipped slightly under his weight. We lay there in the dark, a few centimeters apart, but as far from each other as two opposite banks of a river. "Are you mad at me?" he asked softly. For the first time in months, he realized something had changed. "No," I said truthfully. I wasn't angry. Anger is hot, reactive, desperate. What I felt was finished, and I was staying only to let him see clearly what he'd lost. "You're just different," he said. More distant. I turned to look at him in the streetlight filtering in. "You wanted financial independence," I said quietly. "That comes with emotional independence, too. Now we're like two people sharing a house, splitting expenses. Isn't that what you wanted?" He was silent for a long time. "Honestly," he said, his voice smaller, "I just didn't want to feel like I was carrying everything." And that was the story he'd been telling himself. To believe he was carrying both of us. That I was the weight dragging him down. "That's fine," I said, turning my back to him. "Now you don't have to." The next morning, I woke up before dawn and went for a run. Something I'd given up for years because I'd been too busy taking care of everything else. The city was still quiet. My legs hurt at first, like I was waking up a version of myself I'd let sleep for far too long. But I kept going. And when I got back, sweat soaking my clothes, heart pounding, I felt more alive than I had in months. Marcus was in the kitchen, making instant coffee, the cheap kind I kept for rushed mornings. He looked at me like I was a stranger. "Since when do you run?" "From now on, because I don't have to make you breakfast anymore," I replied, walking straight into the bathroom. And that was how it started. No explosion, no arguments, no dramatic confrontation, just very small shifts. I stopped making early breakfasts, elaborate dinners. I cooked only for one person. I stopped doing his laundry, only washed my own clothes, left his in the basket. I stopped managing social relationships, stopped buying gifts for his family, stopped being the invisible infrastructure that kept his life running smoothly. And I started documenting everything. Every grocery trip, every bottle of dish soap, every roll of toilet paper, every light bulb. Marcus looked at the spreadsheet once, scrolled through the rows. I saw his face go pale. "This is all of it?" "All of it," I confirmed. He closed the laptop, said nothing. A few days later, I taped a strip of tape down the middle of the fridge. The left side was mine. The right side was his. Fair, transparent. Exactly what he wanted. Marcus had never seriously grocery shopped in his life. That's not an exaggeration. He bought bananas that were rock hard, moldy cheese, a whole raw chicken, and stood staring at it in the kitchen at 7 in the evening, like it had personally offended him. "How do you cook this?" he asked. "There are instructions online," I replied, without looking up from my book. The first week was the hardest for him. Not for me. He ate pizza, night after night. By the weekend, the amount he'd spent was already far higher than my expenses. I spent less. Ate simply, ate well. Marcus started getting tired, flustered, irritable. Not because of anything I did, but because, for the first time in his life, he had to manage his own life. Sunday, 3 weeks after our little experiment began, Marcus's sister, Louise, and her husband, David, were coming over for dinner. If this had been before, I would have spent all of Saturday grocery shopping and prepping, woken up early Sunday morning to finish the roast beef, because Louise liked it that way. Homemade mashed potatoes, not the boxed kind, because Marcus would comment if it was boxed. Green beans with almonds, freshly baked dinner rolls, apple pie for dessert, because it was Marcus's favorite. On Saturday morning, Marcus reminded me his sister would be coming the next day. "You know the routine?" he said. "Louise likes to eat right at 5. I was sitting at my desk with student videos playing. I didn't look up. "I'm not cooking," I said. "You mean you're not cooking anything? Louise and David are coming." "Yes, I heard. Your sister and her husband are coming, so you should think about what to feed them." Marcus's face went through several colors. Red, purple, then a strange pale white. "Elena, you need to be reasonable." "I am being very reasonable. We have separate finances now. Your family, your expenses, your guests, your responsibility." "But you've always cooked for them," I interrupted him gently. "Before, I cooked with my money, my time, my effort. Now I don't." He stood there, mouth opening and closing, like a fish pulled out of water. I turned back to the video. The piano playing was decent, but still not quite proficient. Sunday came. Saturday night, Marcus went grocery shopping to prepare for the dinner for the first time. He was gone for 3 hours. 3 full hours. He came home with 4 bags and a look like he'd just lost $1 million. "How did you do this every week?" he asked. "Do what?" "Shop. Find things. Too many choices, too many aisles. Total chaos." I just smiled. Exactly at 5 on Sunday, Louise and David arrived. Louise frowned the moment she walked in. She could smell when something was wrong. That was her superpower. "Where's the roast beef?" she asked, sniffing the air. "I don't smell roast beef." "We're having something else today," Marcus said. He had set the table with cold cuts, coleslaw in plastic containers, bagged bread, and a store-bought apple pie dented on one side. Louise stared at the table like it was a crime scene. "What is this, dinner?" Marcus said weakly. Louise turned to me. I was sitting in the living room, reading, not involved. "Elena, what's going on?" "I didn't cook today," I said cheerfully. Marcus wanted to handle it himself. Marcus wanted to handle it. Louise looked at her brother with an expression that could only be described as astonishment mixed with disgust. "Marcus, you can't even boil water. What the hell made you let Elena stop cooking?" And then, Marcus, poor thing, told her everything. Separate finances, splitting expenses, the fair and transparent system, his mother's brilliant idea, all of it. He told the story while I sat there listening, occasionally turning a page of my book. When he finished, the room was silent. Then Louise started laughing, not kindly but sharp, bitter laughter that cut through the room like a blade. "Let me get this straight," she said slowly. "You and Mom told Elena, the woman who's run this entire household for 6 years, who took care of you while you spent all day at the office, who cooked, cleaned, organized, and planned every aspect of your domestic life, that she was freeloading." "I didn't say that," Marcus muttered. "What exactly did you say?" Marcus didn't answer. "What exactly did you say?" Marcus stayed silent. "That's what I thought," Louise said. She picked up her purse. "David, we're leaving." "What about the pie?" David asked, looking at the dented dessert. "We'll eat somewhere else. I'm not eating this." Louise walked over to me and leaned down to kiss my cheek. "Well done, Elena. This should have happened a long time ago." Then she turned to Marcus. "You have no idea what you had all these years. None at all. I'm calling Dad. This family needs a formal conversation." They left. The door closed with a sharp click. Marcus stood in the middle of the dining room, surrounded by sad cold cuts and plastic containers, looking like a man who had just watched his entire world collapse. I set the folder down on the dining table. Not a throw, nothing dramatic, just a gentle placement. But the sound of the cardboard cover touching the wood rang clearly in the room, uncomfortably quiet. "Everything's here," I said. My voice was calm. No accusations, no pleading. 6 years. Marcus sat across from me, back straight, hands clasped together, the posture of someone who thinks he's about to hear a moral lecture, not an indictment built on numbers. I opened the first folder. "Income," I said. "Mine. Tutoring and my teacher's salary. 6 years. Nearly $400,000. He frowned. I saw the exact moment the number failed to align with the story he'd been telling himself all this time. I turned the page. Housing costs, rent, electricity, water, internet. I paused long enough for him to look at the number circled in red. More than $48,000. The portion I paid beyond an even split. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it again. "I didn't know." "I know," I said, "because I was the one paying." I continued. Not fast, not slow, like reading a financial report to someone who had never carried responsibility. Food, over $23,000. Household supplies, $6,000. Gifts for your family, birthdays, Christmas, anniversaries, nearly $8,000. I looked straight at him when I said the next line. Your golf club membership, too. Marcus swallowed. I thought those things just happened. Yes, I said. You thought so, because I made them invisible. I moved to the final section, the one I had thought about for a long time before including domestic labor. I took a breath. About 15 hours a week cooking, 6 years. Cleaning, household management, schedules, both sides of the family. About 10 hours a week. I didn't assign a high rate, just the minimum for skilled labor. Nearly $200,000, if calculated properly. The room went silent. Marcus stared at the spreadsheet as if the numbers might change if he looked long enough. His shoulders slumped, not from fatigue, but because something inside him had collapsed. His voice went hoarse. I really didn't know, he said quietly. I knew, but I didn't see. He was silent for a long time. Then he said, What can I do? How do I fix this? I don't know if it can be fixed. It was the honest answer. 3 weeks of awakening couldn't erase 6 years of being diminished. I wasn't sure anything could. Marcus started helping with housework the following week, at least the way he understood it. On the first day, he washed the laundry, mine included. Instead of taking it to the laundromat like he had 3 weeks earlier, he put everything into one load. White shirts, colored clothes, kitchen towels. When he took them out, everything was gray. I didn't know I had to separate them, he said, confused like a child. I've been separating them for 6 years, I replied. No sarcasm, just fact. He vacuumed the living room and broke the vacuum cleaner. He was like a child learning to walk, stumbling and getting back up. On the 4th day, the phone rang. It was his father. We put it on speaker. We were both sitting in the living room. His voice was low, slow, direct. I've heard everything. Marcus stayed silent. I could hear his breathing across the room. Do you remember, his father continued, who planned every birthday party, every holiday meal, every family trip? Do you remember how comfortably you lived on your wife's effort? It was Elena, Frank said. All of it was your wife. I didn't mean to. Intent doesn't erase consequences, he cut in. Elena carried your share for years, in silence. And you called that freeloading. Marcus lowered his head. Elena, I'm sorry, his father said. I was wrong. I chose silence for the sake of peace. And that peace hurt you. He paused, then said the last line, slow and heavy. If you still want to keep this marriage, you need to learn to see value before you lose it, not after. The call ended. Marcus sat there for a long time, said nothing, didn't look at me, just sat there, like a man who was understanding for the first time that love doesn't run on its own. It needs to be seen, protected, called by its proper name. As for me, I stood up and washed the cup I had just used. Only my cup. The rest, he would have to keep learning on his own. The next morning, he handed me a piece of paper. No, several pieces of paper, a long list. At the top of the page, in his familiar, careful handwriting, were the words, "Things Elena has done for me." The list ran 3 pages long. Preparing my work lunches, remembering my family's birthdays every year, managing social calendars, tracking doctor's appointments, handling home repairs, organizing photo albums, planning family gatherings, buying anniversary gifts, sending thank you cards, hosting dinner parties, decorating for holidays, remembering my friends' names, and more. At the bottom of the page, he wrote, "I am an idiot. I've been thinking about this for weeks," he said, "about all the invisible things you did, the things I didn't notice because they just happened. But it wasn't magic. It was you. It was always you." I looked at the list. My eyes burned. I didn't trust my voice to be steady enough to speak. "I don't want us to stay separate anymore," he said. "Not with money, not with anything. I want to go back to being partners, really, where I see and value what you contribute, instead of taking it for granted." "Words are easy, Marcus," I said. "I know," he replied. "That's why I want to prove it. Give me the chance to show it with actions." I took a slow breath. "I need boundaries," I said. "Not just apologies. I need respect, recognition, and repeated action, not for a few weeks, but long term." He nodded. No argument. In the months that followed, Marcus began to teach himself. Without asking first, without waiting for reminders. He watched cooking videos, took notes on recipes, tried, failed, tried again. He managed his own daily life, grocery shopped, made lists, forgot things, bought the wrong things, ate repetitive meals, spent more money, got more tired. One evening, he sat down heavily in a chair, hands slack at his sides, and sighed. "I don't understand how you did all of this every day," he said. "Working, running the house, taking care of everyone." I looked at him. No sarcasm, no satisfaction. "Because I had to," I said, "and because no one else did." He nodded, exhaustion plain on his face. For the first time, the weariness I'd carried for years appeared on him. Not as punishment, but so he could understand. And that was only the beginning. 6 months later, I woke up on a Sunday morning and found Marcus already in the kitchen, not with the tension of someone still learning, but with the calm confidence of someone who had integrated new skills into his daily rhythm. The coffee was being brewed properly. The water was measured precisely. The grounds were bloomed for the right amount of time. He was prepping ingredients for a vegetable frittata, softly whistling. I stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching him move through a space that used to belong solely to me. He had entered this kitchen gradually, recipe by recipe, mistake by mistake, until it was no longer something I carried alone, but a shared space. "Good morning," I said. He turned, smiling for real. "Good morning. I'm trying the herb frittata you showed me last month again. Let's eat on the balcony. The weather's nice today." "Perfect," I said, pouring 2 cups of coffee. "Your parents are still coming at 1? "Yes, but Mom said she's bringing food today." I raised an eyebrow. "Your mom bringing food instead of expecting to be cooked for?" "Believe it or not," he laughed. "Dad said if she didn't change, there wouldn't be traditional lunches anymore." The frittata that morning was genuinely good. The vegetables were cooked just right. The eggs were soft. The seasoning balanced. We ate on the balcony as the city slowly woke up below. I thought about 6 months earlier, when every meal felt like invisible exhaustion. "I got promoted," Marcus said suddenly. I looked up. "Chief Operations Officer. They offered it yesterday. 20% raise." He paused. "I told them I needed time to talk to you before accepting." "Why?" "Because it'll be more work, more pressure. and I want to know if we can keep the balance we've built. 6 months ago, he had treated his success as a reason to separate himself from me. Now, he was asking my input like a partner. What do you want? I asked. I want to take it, he said honestly, but not if it puts us back where we were, and we're preparing to welcome our child. Then we adjust, I said. Hire cleaning help, plan meals, set work hour boundaries. You're okay with me taking the position? I took his hand. I was never not okay with your ambition. I was only not okay with being invisible while supporting it. He squeezed my hand. Then I'll take it. I nodded. When Victoria and Frank arrived, Victoria set her food bag down with a slightly awkward smile. I know, she said first. It sounds ironic. But the food here is really good, and it's what you like. Thank you, Mom, Marcus said. Frank looked at me and gave a small nod. Victoria was different, softer, slower. She was going to therapy regularly, learning to ask instead of judge, sometimes slipping back into old habits, but stopping herself and apologizing. Marcus said you have a new client? Victoria asked. Yes, I replied. A young billionaire woman. That's wonderful, she said, and I knew she meant it. You must be very good. Victoria looked at me. I'm learning to see that. I'm sorry it took so long. Frank raised his glass. To growth. To families learning to truly see one another. After lunch, Victoria sat beside me on the balcony. I owe you an apology, she said. Not just for that comment, but for the past 6 years. Her voice trembled. You were kind, and I was cruel. My throat tightened. Thank you for saying that, I said. That evening, after Victoria and Frank left, Marcus and I cleaned up together. The ritual we'd built over the months, moving smoothly through the kitchen, him washing, me drying, talking about our day and our plans, and the small details of shared life. What do you think about going back to a joint account? He asked. Not out of obligation, but because I want to. Transparency, respect. I turned to look at him. Are you sure? I am. These 6 months taught me what it means to be a real partner. I hugged him. Okay. We stood there, in the kitchen that had once been a battlefield. Now a place of rebuilding. The spreadsheets were put away, no longer needed, because the truth now lived in every small action. Some stories end with explosions and dramatic exits. Ours ended with quiet reconstruction, with the daily choice to show up, to try, and to truly see each other.